The next time you read of an orgy in the News of the World, you will know that the article has been written by the world's greatest experts on the subject.
These people work there now,
Murdoch,
you know.
The general public would not believe how many news stories are fake. Ian Cutler gives the inside story on each of the following tall tales published as truth.
He's on the game anyway. One man went to prison from this story.
Rupert Murdoch.
High-profile lies. Powerful men with their suicide lies. Blowjobs, whores, and a fake front page. It's only entertainment anyway. Conspiracy stories, private spy. News of the screws selling big fat lies. Ian Cutler's taking the pics. The camera assassin, he knows all the tricks. Captain Cutler, the best there is. Genius exposure, yeah, he'll do the biz. Drug squad profiting from confiscation. A symptom of the rot in this alienation. Hitler diaries which don't exist. Fabricating news with an evil twist. Camera assassin. Ruthless people. High-profile lives. Camera assassin. Got no morals. What a surprise.
The vilest creatures of all.
Tina Dalglish, sordid wife-swapping group. False story, lay preacher, suicide. Sir Nicholas Lloyd, lover of blowjobs and Ian Cutler's famous Animals Room. Famous Animals Room. Animals. Ray Chapman, cocaine addict. Convicted felon. Sex with prostitutes. Married a former prostitute. Trevor Kempson, bondage aficionado. Mazur Mahmood. Disgrace to journalism, anti-Semitic comments. Rupert Murdoch, Adolf Hitler. Diaries, the story was faked.
Tailor-made stories from the gutter press. They couldn't give a monkey more or less. Don't abuse the space, cash in hand. Don't believe the hype, it's journalistic scam. Vice squad's named for what they really are. Power-seeking demons going way too far. You got the double agents in crime and vice, selling their souls for the highest price. Nothing is sacred in that don't follow lives. They got no love. What a surprise! Army torture, shock, new claims, sensational exposure. It's purely a game. Conspiracy stories, private spy. News of the screws telling big bad lies. Camera assassin. Ruthless people, high-profile lives. Camera assassin. You got no love. What a surprise! What a surprise!
Me and Jerry fake most of these pictures. And it's all bollocks. Keep your hands off our children. Front page splash. Clive Cook, who was in charge of the story, and he went with a 13-year-old boy and got a blowjob off him. And I said, that's paedophilia. He said, oh, fuck off. You're a photographer, I'm the journalist.
Don't believe the hype, it's journalistic scam. Vice squad's named for what they really are. Power-seeking demons going way too far. You got the double agents in crime and vice, selling their souls for the highest price. Nothing is sacred in that don't follow lives. They got no love. What a surprise! Army torture, shock, new claims, sensational exposure. It's purely a game. Conspiracy stories, private spy.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be interviewing former world-famous photojournalist. I present the camera assassin. I'm with Ian Cutler, former star professional photographer whose career was brought to an end by a major stroke. Ian worked for over 20 years for the British tabloid The News of the World, part of tycoon Rupert Murdoch's empire. He also worked freelance for newspapers such as The Mail, The Times, The Telegraph, The Express, The Sunday Mirror, and also for BBC and ITV News. In particular, I'm going to be talking to Ian about some of the exclusives and exposés which he was involved in during his time with the News of the World in the 1970s and 1980s. Hello Ian. I'd like to talk to you about some of the stories you were involved in and find out a little bit more about how you and your colleagues worked to uncover major scandals.
Yeah.
A lot of the information that we're talking about today is reproduced in Ian's book, The Camera Assassin, which is available now and which is currently doing the rounds. The book's also been sent to the Prime Minister's office, and we have here a letter from the Prime Minister's office acknowledging receipt. So hopefully the PM will get a chance to have a look at this book too.
Ian Cutler has been called in. He pretends his Range Rover has broken down outside a modest-looking house in West London. According to their red light contacts, this is a vice den operated by a woman called Paddington Peggy, who might sound more at home in the pages of the Beano, and who is scheduled for an unwanted helping of publicity in the News of the World. Despite Cutler's expertise, his cover seems threatened by a persistent small boy, determined to help him out of his self-imposed fix. While Cutler is forced into playing the part of a motorist in distress, Paddington Peggy takes the opportunity to limp away from the scene, intrigued rather than alarmed by the curious dialogue emerging from near the stricken Range Rover. By the time Cutler persuades his Good Samaritan to leave him alone, it's too late. Paddington Peggy has made good her escape, leaving him to settle down with just his camera for company.
Which one now, this one?
Although bare-chested ladies appear with unfailing regularity in his other popular newspaper, The Sun, proprietor Rupert Murdoch has recently banned full-frontal poses in the News of the World. This burst of enthusiasm for the sanctity of the Sabbath not only means that the word titillation has lost its most vital syllable, but that the photographer's art now depends on reminding us that beneath their shimmering frocks, model girls like Tony are as naked as the day they were bearing all on page 3.
There, yes. And turning your face a little bit more into the camera. Lovely. Super. Yes. And again. There. Yes. That looks smashing. One more like that. There. Yes. Nice.
Special investigator David Potts often pretends to be a seedy North Country businessman on the lookout for a good time when he goes undercover to expose vice rackets. Known somewhat irreverently to his colleagues as the Vicar, Potts is reputed to have the softest skin in Fleet Street, a legacy of the many massage parlours he's visited, posing as an ordinary punter and then, in the time-honoured manner, making his excuses and leaving just before things get out of hand. Another part of Soho where another investigation is underway. Show business editor Ivan Waterman probes unknown superstar Sam Neill about the private man behind the public figure.
Probably try to side you with an image of some kind. And how do you feel about being labelled by popular press as a heartthrob and receive?
At reporter Jerry Brown's impromptu birthday party in a darkened wine bar.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Who put you up to this?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jerry. Happy birthday to you.
Keeping to a tight schedule, the singing telegram makes her way onto Reuters and her next hapless victim, leaving a bewildered birthday boy in her wake.
Shocking. Shocking. Friday nights are the worst. Cheers.
Heartthrob actor Sam Neill has a devil of a time dodging questions about the leading lady in his life. She is fellow New Zealander Lee
Range Rover trick and opted for a more subtle ploy. Inside his own GPO lookalike tent, he's poised to grab a shot of the Vice King outside his downtown Stoke Newington headquarters. The plan is to trick Ross into the open and then lure him across the road so that he's within range of Cutler's camera, poking out of a special peephole on the far side of the tent.
Ross, a former lorry driver, charged £25 for each girl he introduced to me. The charge for sex was said to be £50. Naturally, I declined his disgusting offer.
Undercover reporter Tina Dalgleish is about to make her own offer to the delinquent pensioner. Posing as a housewife who gets a perverted thrill from listening to toilet talk in the street, she's hoping to tempt him out of his penthouse with a £5 note in return for a brief but explicit sex chat, hopefully across the road in front of the greengrocers and in full view of Cutler's trusty long lens.
In a way, I suppose I got him into bed. I'm not sure why. Perhaps because I was remembering the time in Rome when we hadn't, but it wasn't a good idea. I had the extraordinary feeling he was taking the mickey out of me all the time, even in bed, and bed with him didn't work for me at all. I felt I wasn't good enough for the great Rex. His malice and hidden laughter were all very subtle.
Back at the stakeout, something's gone shockingly wrong. Ross has been tempted into the open, but he's completely out of sight of both the tent-bound Cutler and of our film camera on the balcony of some nearby flats. Waiting for the drama to unfold, we can listen to their chat thanks to a microphone hidden up Tina's skirt. The quality of the dialogue and of the recording leaves something to be desired.
Very awkward for a lot of girls. You can work on them for ages, and they respond more through speech than what they do rubbing the clothes. That's one type of girl, but there's so many hundreds of types of girls. I'd like to find out what type of girl you are. Personally, I think you're the type that you would like to, because you're not really onto physical thing. I think you like the more genital thing, Look, couldn't you possibly come
With Ross well ahead on points and refusing to move obligingly into frame, Tina and her companion make off back to Fleet Street, while Cutler, tired of squinting out at the greengrocers, also decides to call it a morning and take an early lunch. This is the moment of maximum danger, for if any real post office workers go past, Cutler's cover could be blown sky high. He works efficiently and quickly to minimise the risks, while striving to preserve a casual, matter-of-fact air. Little does he suspect that his quarry is also emerging from cover, and that he too is being driven on by unsatisfied appetites. Almost unbelievably, Ross starts to head straight for the greengrocers, on which Cutler's camera had been trained for most of the morning. Sublimely unaware that his prey is now exactly where he wanted him, Cutler completes his clandestine packing operations, without so much as a backward glance, which is all he would have needed to see his quarry emerging back into the open, and strolling calmly and confidently back to his den of vice, unscathed, uncaring, and so far as those of us on the balcony knew, unphotographed by any camera except ours. It seemed like the nearest miss since Norman Scott's dog got an unwelcome piece of lead in his ear. But as every News of the World reader knows, truth is often stranger than fiction. Incredibly, Tina's companion, without the help of a Range Rover or even a post office tent, had persuaded Ross to pose for a couple of photos during the toilet talk session. Back in Bouverie Street, these amateurish but vital photos were now given the full treatment, and the man, labelled by the headline writers as Mr. Nasty, was made ready to join more than 12 million people for Sunday breakfast. Some photos taken earlier in the week inside Ross's flat were also examined with particular care.
And bearing in mind that we're looking at this as a major expose of a very nasty man.
Sure.
And following our debate last night, I don't want anything to appear which suggests we are wallowing in the subject. We're after him, and this is the way we're doing it.
Spot on.
What I've done there is a selection of marks, and I've also, right at the front of the story, said even his own kind detest him. A vice girl called Kathy says, that man makes me shudder. If I thought a daughter of mine was being abused by him, I'd strangle him.
Newlyweds posing at a Highland fling. This will provide the balance, the romance and the showbiz bazam to seal the paper's success. After an agony of uncertainty, the much-prized picture is carried into the composing room.
Yes, you do, yeah.
Johnny?
All lines,
That's just the first.
all lines. Just can you do me a first? Beautiful.
Imagine those two together.
Fantastic, yeah.
Right.
As the presses thunder away in the basement, a phone call prompts the first official interest in the Mr. Nasty expose.
If that process would not be gone through that quickly.
Though more surprised by the presence of our camera than by the contents of the front page, the inspector agrees that the story about their renegade Mr. Man bears careful reading and further investigation.
There he is. I mean, we have him fairly well documented in that front page.
Yes.
And we can give you the supporting detail as we have it and as you require it. Is that okay?
Yes.
Do you need any more help from me, or if Stuart Cutler could now perhaps, you know, take you upstairs with Charlie Sandell?
Yes.
And give you what we've got.
Right.
You can take it from there.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Yeah,
All right.
nice to meet you.
Thank you. Give
Yeah.
me the detail.
As the first edition starts to wing its way to the furthermost parts of Britain, it's time for the top editorial team to relax at a special supper, provided free by the management. It's here, after the hectic events of the week, that they can sit back, reflect on their achievements, and enjoy a good wine.
Bring in an element of
actually give us much space to living with laughter, as I would have liked to have seen.
Well, it had its place in the paper, I think.
Yes.
That it was a useful balancing item.
I agree, John. I thought
when
it
you
deserved
consider it against
a slightly longer run, actually.
But everybody says
compared
that.
with last
Everybody
week.
says my story was cut and it wasn't long enough. But if you look at it in the context of a newspaper, you have to say that is worth that. That's worth that. That balances that, and so on. And hopefully you get it right.
Well, we had the piece round at about, what, 8 o'clock, something like that? 7:30, 8 o'clock? No, they're very excited. They're going to move in tonight. They want to get a magistrate to swear a warrant. And they've gathered a team at Scotland Yard. I mean, they've called them all in tonight, and they're going to raid the premises. And I think our friend will be in court by about Monday or Tuesday.
Another Saturday night ritual centres on the arrival of their two great tabloid competitors, the Sunday Mirror and People. Their first editions receive a critical, if speedy, examination.
Do they have die pictures, or do they not have
I'm
die
just
pictures?
looking. I don't think they have. No.
Looks as though Frank Hart's piece of organisation for us today.
Yeah, no, the new tech has beaten them, I think. They've not...
We've beaten them on a motorbike with a mobile one.
Yeah, that's right, the old-fashioned
Never mind
way.
shots,
Yeah, motorbike, beaten by a motorbike.
Yeah. That's pretty good. I think
I think they've...
I would happily settle for the delightful Di in the Highlands in her tartan, whatever you call those things, two-piece or suit, or...
Yeah.
She's beautiful.
Again, in the front of the paper, a lot of Saturday news. Nothing wrong with that, but don't think they had a particularly good week by the look of it.
And I think with both of them, once again, on a really good, hard, news-based expose splash.
Yeah,
you know,
there's no
without
comparison.
blowing our own
No
trumpets,
comparison at all. Yeah.
We really have seen them
Yeah.
off again.
Yeah.
And Mum's Revenge on the Ripper.
Yeah.
But it's not a news story. And there it is, so that's that.
Yeah. That's also not, I don't think that's quite on, is it? Mid-air strip plus Angie Best of Thousand.
Well, Angie Best we threw out.
Well, we nearly
Well, she got that. She found the money, didn't she?
On the basis that we had somebody called Princess Diana and Prince Charles, and they haven't got it, I'm very pleased to say. Certainly not for their first edition, unless, of course, they've put the lovely lady inside, which would astonish
Yes,
me.
now page 5.
Have they really?
It's a rotten picture, actually. It's not very good.
Looks a lot to me like one of the 6 or 7 pictures we rejected late afternoon.
It is their own. It's not even a PA picture. It's not even an agency picture. It's actually their own job. But
is it really? Well,
yeah.
if that's their own and the best they can do, they're very welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I must say it looks very much like par for the course at this time on a Saturday evening, that they don't give us an immense amount to worry about.
They've obviously filled up the front on the day. There's a lot of 2-day stories in there. There's
Right,
nothing very
sure,
special, actually.
Sure. Yeah.
And the splash, I don't know whether you've had a debate about that. Well,
We've had a short debate about the splash.
We've got our own
John,
story
I'm thinking
on that
as the people who've cornered the market in Ripper matters, and I wouldn't like to go too deeply into that.
Well,
and,
it's nice to know that they've noticed they have an opposition. They clearly thought they might steal a march on us with that one.
Kind of tangential, third-rate Ripper copy, that seems to me.
Yeah.
However, I'm sure they've tried very hard. One mustn't knock other people's serious professional efforts.
Yeah.
This article, The English Angels of Bethlehem, was based on your visit to Bethlehem in 1978 when you took photographs of aid workers who were caring for children injured under the occupation. With something as fundamental as the inhumane treatment of children, I bet Rupert Murdoch was keen to snap up this article.
No.
Really?
Oh,
What were his reasons for rejecting the article?
well, he said, this is Rupert Murdoch saying, get out there and photograph more cunt Cutler.
Okay. So a major theme was to
That
sell...
was Rupert Murdoch saying that.
I see. So a major theme was to sell the public titillating sex stories.
Yeah.
One of the sex stories that you were involved in, the night they raffled Maggie, was about a pub in Streatham High Street where the manager was involved in various sordid activities, such as supplying transvestites for customers for sex parties. On one occasion there was also a raffle in which a girl, Maggie, was one of the raffle prizes. Ian, how were you and Chapman able to keep a professional distance from what was going on?
Well, it was a front page splash, and Chapman didn't keep his distance. He had sex with the raffle girl.
So Chapman himself was involved in sexual activities with the people in the story that he was investigating?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And did Chapman do any other undercover work that night?
Yes.
What else was he involved in on the same night?
He also had anal intercourse with a transvestite.
I see. And how long did Chapman actually work for the News of the World?
Well, he was working there right until he died 4 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago.
So, despite his involvement in these sort of activities, he was actually retained in the employment of the News of the World?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, I see. This article, Gay NCA, published by the News of the World in March 1980, was a story about Hotel Y, a flagship for the Young Men's Christian Association, or YMCA. Ian had received a tip-off that rent boys were using the hostel as a pick-up paradise for customers. Ian, I believe you found several young men who were actually available for business in the hostel.
No.
In the article, there are actually photographs of 3 young men that you took snapshots of during this investigation. Who were these people?
Well, my friend Bobby Cummins posed for most of these pictures, or all of his pictures.
So, despite the tip-off, you were unable to find anybody actually,
No.
any rent boys actually available?
Front page story, no.
So it was a front page story, but you still went ahead and published the
Yeah, of
story,
course.
but fabricated it as you went along?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Ian, did the News of the World know that this story was fabricated?
Of course.
And they were still happy to go ahead and publish it?
Of course.
Why was that, do you think?
Because Rupert said to the editor, more.
So he was interested in the scandal rather than the truth behind the story?
Yeah, sure.
I see. So Ian, in the article, the Gay MC article, there were 3 photographs of different lads. One with a crash helmet, one hiding behind a book smoking a joint, and also one with a guy who had a cap and a moustache. Are we saying here that all those 3 photographs were of the same person?
Yes.
And was this guy, Bobby Cummins, known to the News of the World office?
Yes.
Was he actually ever seen in the News of the World office?
Yes.
And the staff knew that he was the guy who was involved in all these 3 separate photographs?
Yeah, sure.
Right. This story, published in October 1979, was about an expose of a homosexual bondage dungeon. You and journalist Trevor Kempson, who also worked for the News of the World, had been warned by a contact that outsiders who tried to infiltrate this setup were in danger.
Yeah.
Ian, how did you ensure that your cover wasn't blown without taking part in these sordid sex acts?
Well, Trevor Kempson was found hanging by his testicles and apparently loved it.
So,
front page stories in the News of the World.
So although he was actually specifically Chief of Vice Investigations for the News of the World at the time, and he was bringing this sort of thing to the public attention as a scandal, he was quite happy to participate in it whilst investigating it himself.
Sure. He ended up dying of AIDS on the job.
And that was a result of investigations that he was doing, or part of the perks of the investigation?
Well, part of the perks of the investigation.
Okay. Ian, for this article, if you go down to the woods today, you and a female journalist went undercover to investigate in response to an advert for wife swapping, which was advertised in a Contact magazine.
Yeah.
The action took place on a campsite in Wales, and I understand that you had the opportunity to photograph and interview a lot of those people involved.
Well, there was only 3 of them involved.
There were only 3 people involved.
And me and Tina.
And any members of the public?
No, there was 3 guys, 2 guys and a woman.
So there were members of the public who had actually responded to the advertisement as well?
Well, 3.
3 members of the public. So the article was written, the photographs were published. What was the response of the members of the public when they were exposed?
Well, they said Tina phoned them and said, "You're going in the newspaper Sunday," and there's front page story on the paper, you know, and he said he will commit suicide, the Arnold.
So one of the guys involved had threatened to commit suicide.
Yeah, sure.
Was that actually known before the article was published?
Yeah, of course.
And were you aware of it before the article was published?
Yeah, I went into Rod Tyler I said, that guy is not stable.
And Rod Tyler was the
The
features
features
editor.
editor of the News of the World.
And when you told him that the guy wasn't stable and that there was a chance he could commit suicide, what did Rod Tyler do?
He picked up the phone and phoned Rupert, because he was upstairs in the Booby Street office, you know.
So who made the decision to go ahead with the article?
Well, Rod was on the phone for about 3 minutes, and I saw Rod getting redder and redder and red, and he put the phone down. He said, "Run it," and I said, "Can I ask you what he said?" He said, "Yeah." He said he called him a swear word, and said, "Run it, run it, run it, run it, run it, run it." He's fucking, you know, like he's a maniac.
So the article was published, and what happened?
Well, it was published on Sunday, and he committed suicide Saturday night.
So the member of the public involved who had actually warned that he would commit suicide if the story went ahead, actually did so.
Yeah.
This article, Cameraman Mike clicked 3 times at wedding, was published by the News of the World in March 1980. It was about wedding photographers who scored with members of the wedding party, including, it's alleged, the actual brides. And this was an article that you were also involved in, and I believe you took the photographs for it, Ian.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Weren't the photographers involved at all worried about the impact on their professional reputation by being so public about what they were doing?
No, because that guy is a mate of mine. That camera, I've got here.
So that's your camera?
Yeah.
So, but was this guy actually a photographer?
No, he was a guy involved with Unlock, the geezer I just spoken about.
So he was the same guy that you photographed for the Gay MCA?
Yeah, sure.
Article. Okay.
Yeah.
So, were the News of the World management aware that this front page article was fraudulent?
Yes.
And they weren't at all bothered?
Rupert says the story comes first.
So you're saying that what they're interested in is the story, regardless of whether there's actually any fact behind it?
Yeah, sure.
Fine. Ian, this front page news story, What Goes On Behind the Bars at number 58B, was about a lady named Marianne Sinclair who ran a bondage dungeon from her home in the Earls Court area of London. During this investigation, journalist Trevor Kempson went into this lady's house to inquire about the services she offered. Was he at all concerned about being able to exit from her home without being subjected to any sadistic torture himself?
No, because he plated the girl and was hung up by his private parts, and he had his arse whipped.
So he was quite happy to receive services from the lady that it was investigating, even though the theme of the article was to expose something which was publicly abhorrent.
Yeah, of course.
Well, that adds an entirely different angle on the story, doesn't it?
Well, there's a different angle to how half the story is.
And there's a different angle to Trevor Kempson in this case as
Yeah,
well.
of course. I liked Trevor because he was fun, but he got up to skullduggery.
This article, published in December 1977, entitled Scandal of the 5,000 Sex Parlours, was a follow-up report from a 1975 article about massage parlours fronting prostitution. Ian, how did you and Ray Chapman manage to obtain interviews and photos to bring this sordid scandal to the public's attention?
Well, me and Trevor Kempson and Ray Chapman laid a bird from every massage parlour there you see, and 2.
How many actual parlours were involved?
15.
There were 50?
Yeah.
50?
No, 15.
15, okay. And while you were doing all this work, presumably as freelancers you received expenses, is that correct?
Yeah, I received $3,000 of expenses. It was a lot of money in those days.
In the 1970s and 1980s?
Yeah.
And were you able to claim that sort of money for any investigation that you did?
Yeah, sure.
So there was an awful lot of money that was being paid for you to have jollies while you were doing your investigation? Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. And this presumably was all coming out of the News of the World's budget?
Yeah, sure.
This article, published in 1978 by the News of the World, was entitled The Truth About Mr Goodall and His Bournemouth Bells. It was a report about a model agency which was used as a cover for prostitution, and boss David Goodall received a prison sentence as a result of Ray Chapman's expose. Ian, how did Ray Chapman get to the bottom of what was going on behind this story?
Well, he had anal sex with 2 of these girls.
While he was on the job, actually doing the investigation?
Yes.
And what about you? Were you involved with any of them?
Was involved as well.
So really there was hypocrisy going on all through?
Yeah, of course.
In the 1977 article, Vice Girls of Mayfair, there was a headline story about major vice trade in the West End of London. Ian, you were involved in the photography, and also your colleague, Trevor Kempson, was involved in the investigative journalism. What was the outcome of Trevor Kempson's involvement in this particular story?
Well, the Meadows brothers gave him AIDS. And that's why we decided to go and turn the Meadows brothers over.
So were you involved with the Meadows brothers before this article was published?
Yes.
And what was your involvement with them?
Just goose and birds.
So they supplied you with prostitutes free of charge?
Yeah, sure.
Why was that?
Well, to keep the name out of the paper.
So basically you threatened to expose them and they were giving you free privileges to keep the lid on what was happening?
Yeah.
So why did the story come out in the end? Why did you decide to expose them?
Well, Trevor got AIDS from these 2 Meadows brothers.
From one of the girls that they supplied?
Yeah, sure.
And then as a sort of a rather belated revenge, he decided to reveal them?
Yeah.
And what was the consequence of these 2 guys as a result of the article?
They got their clubs shut up.
And did they have any criminal action taken against them?
Yeah, sure.
While the original use of the club and the prostitutes was going on, what was the knowledge within the News of the World of what was happening?
They knew about it, of course.
What about the upper echelons, the management of the News of the World? Were they aware?
Yeah, of course.
And were any of them involved in using the services of the club?
Yeah, sure.
So this kind of scandal that was within the News of the World went on at all levels?
Yeah, of course.
That's quite disturbing information, that these guys who are once again supposed to be protecting the public conscience and bringing people to justice were all the while involved in double dealing.
Of course.
For this article, The Scandal of Subway Number 4, the main feature was a new squad of Scotland Yard policewomen who were brought on board to round up hardened teenage prostitutes in London. Ian, you and Ray Chapman were involved in investigating this case.
Yeah.
How were you and Chapman able to get close enough to these girls to get them to tell you about their lives? I mean, you told me, for example, before we started the interview, that there was one occasion during the investigation where you were in the front of your Range Rover, and I believe that Ray Chapman was actually having sex in the back, anal sex in fact, with one of these girls.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
Yes.
What happened after the event? I understand that Ray Chapman gave you some more information after the event, which put a different light on the whole on the whole story. Is that correct?
Yes.
What did he actually tell you?
He told me she was a 15-year-old girl.
So one of the News of the World journalists who was investigating this story was actually involved in underage sex with one of the girls that you were interviewing.
Oh, yes.
Well, that's quite shocking.
Yeah. I regret it at the moment, but...
But you had no idea of that at the time? No. This article, Keep Your Hands Off Our Children, was published in 1978 and was an expose of a child porn ring. Ian, I understand that journalist Clive Cook was involved in investigating this story.
Yes.
How did journalists such as Clive Cook manage to deal with working with vile perverts who were instigating these type of sex rings without actually exposing their disgust at what was happening?
Clive Cook committed an act of paedophilia with this young 13-year-old boy.
And this boy was one of the victims in the story that he was investigating. Sure. This front page story of the News of the World, Fury of the Evil Escort Boss, was about a guy keeping an image of respectability in London, living in a manor house whilst fronting a vice ring. Ian, was this story genuine?
Part.
So which parts of the story were not genuine?
This girl, she was a friend of mine.
So the girl was a friend of yours and she wasn't actually involved as one of the prostitutes at all?
No.
I understand also that your colleague Trevor Kempson was attacked and seriously injured by the escort boss involved during the investigation. Is that correct?
He was attacked, but I painted blood on his face.
So the extent of the injuries were just fabricated for effect?
Yeah, to get him charged.
To get him charged for...
running a vice ring.
And Ian, did any of the News of the World management know that this story was partially fabricated before it was published?
Yes.
So once again we have a story which was brought to the public attention, which the News of the World management and possibly the editors knew was to be at least partially untrue.
Murdoch knew.
So you're saying Rupert Murdoch knew that this article was at least partially fabricated?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Ian. According to Ian's book, when Rupert Murdoch first joined the News of the World as a hands-on manager, he was very interested in what was happening with the British welfare state and was outraged at the number of dole claimants that seemed to be taking advantage of the welfare state and claiming benefits falsely. He actually launched a crusade against these sort of people, and all reporters and journalists were actually given the remit of going out and investigating and finding as many of these sort of stories as they possibly could. Ian himself and his colleagues were involved in a number of stories, and we have a couple of examples here that we're going to ask Ian about. One of the articles in the Welfare Scroungers series was entitled Spaghetti Scroungers, and it was about a group of Italian immigrants who were happy to boast that they were claiming welfare benefits in the UK with no intention of ever becoming economically active. Ian, weren't these guys at all worried that by being so open about what they were doing, they were effectively putting the nail in the coffin lid of their cushy lifestyle?
No, because they weren't all on the dole.
So who were the people in the photograph?
Well, Italian holiday makers and all that.
And did you get people to post from anywhere else?
I gave them a tenner each to pose.
I believe that you told me in an earlier discussion that also some of them were employees in a local Italian restaurant, is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
So the actual image that you were portraying in this picture was largely false?
Yes, sure.
Another article in the same line of stories and the News of the World's flash headline was entitled Fiddler on the Roof, and it was actually about dole claimants who were taking money from the state whilst being paid cash for building work. Ian, following your exposure of Stan Clark's cash-only business, was any action taken by the tax authorities or the welfare services?
No.
Why was that?
Because the whole story was fake.
The whole story was fake?
Every little bit of it.
So did Stan Clark actually exist?
No. His name is Smokey.
So he was, again, somebody that you knew, that you were using?
He was a brother of Bobby Cummins.
He was the brother of one of the guys that you'd used to fabricate other articles?
Yeah, sure.
And once again, did the News of the World have any suspicion that this story wasn't genuine?
Yes.
How can you be sure of that?
I can be sure because they knew Ray Chapman was Ray Chapman is the longest serving reporter anywhere in the News of the World. He's dead now, but he was right up to the 3 years ago.
So given that Ray Chapman had been with the News of the World for so long, and it's fair to say that he was representing the News of the World, and whatever he did was in the name of the News of the World.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I understand. Ian, moving forward a little bit in time. In the late 1990s and into 2000, there were many headline articles for the News of the World with the byline of journalist Mazza Mahmood. One of the shocking exposures that he was involved in was the attempt by a group of immigrants in London to kidnap Victoria Beckham and her sons. Do you have any inside information on this story?
Yeah, I analysed the story because I'm a good analyser, and I thought this must be false. And I went to the solicitors for the defence and told them about it.
So you actually gave them information which helped them form a defence case for the immigrants involved?
Yeah.
And what happened? Were the immigrants acquitted?
Yes.
They were acquitted on the basis that Mahmood was actually involved in the setup, is that correct?
Yes.
So once again, we've moved forward a little bit in time, but it seems these sort of stories are still being used by the News of the World.
Yeah.
Anyway, conspiracy stories, private spy, news of the screws selling big fat lies. Ian Cutler's